everybody, welcome back. I am so glad that you're here today because today we're going to talk about something that I know a lot of people struggle with, and I know it hits close to home for a lot of people in such a way that it's devastating to so many people. Today we're talking about credit card debt. Now, before you roll your eyes and you think, yeah, I've heard it all, nothing works, or I know it's bad, but I've tried to fix it before, and again, nothing worked, or it's so bad, I don't see any way forward. Stick with me because today's episode can change everything for you. Even better, today is not a lecture, it's a story and an action plan, one that really works. Actually, it's gonna be two stories, and I promise by the end of this episode, you're going to have a real, practical, step-by-step game plan for getting out from under this thing, no matter how deep you are. There is always hope, and today I'm going to show you how. I'm Tammy Kayata. I'm a certified financial planner professional, and I spent over 15 years helping over 6,000 people completely transform their financial lives at a Fortune 100 company. And I saw up close every version of the story. I know what works, I know what the industry will not tell you, and now that I'm out on my own, I am finally free to share all of it with you. No jargon, no watered down advice, no false promises, and no sponsor telling me what I can and cannot say. This is Off the Record, where ordinary people build extraordinary wealth. Today, as I said, we are talking about how to truly budget your way out of debt. All right, let's get into it. I want to introduce you to two families with pretty common stories. First, meet Maria. Maria is a nurse at a community hospital, and she's married to her husband, who runs his own contracting business. Together, they bring in close to $300,000 a year, which, let's be honest, is a really strong household income. And it shows. Maria's family has a beautiful home, the kind of home that looks like it belongs in an interior design magazine. Her kids are very active with music, drama, sports, multiple club sports even. They've got the fancy new cars, the boat, the lake house, the condo at the ski resort, all the luxury, all the toys. When they go out with their friends, Maria and her husband are the first ones to reach across that table and pick up the check. Money was never a big deal in their house. They just live. Now let me introduce you to Sharon. Sharon works as a manager at a retail department store. Her husband is in sales at a pretty small engineering firm. Together they earn about $150,000 a year, half of what Maria's family makes. Now they live in the same town as Maria, but their home is substantially smaller. It is still beautiful, but it's much more modest. They also have fewer luxuries in their life. But here's the thing, Sharon's family is also happy like Maria's. They are genuinely deeply happy. They take at least one big family vacation every year. They sneak away for long weekends whenever they can. They're into adventure, skiing, surfing, multi-day hiking trips. They're present, connected as a family, and that's what matters most to them. So on the outside, these are two very different families living very different versions of success. But they both ended up sitting across from me with the exact same problem. Both families came to see me, a financial consultant, because of high levels of credit card debt. Sharon's family, $55,000 in credit card debt, more than a third of their gross annual income. Maria's family, $160,000, more than half of their annual income. Now, outwardly, to other people, neither one of them looked like or acted like the debt was even real. Sharon and her husband were laughing and going on their weekend trips while Maria and her husband were dropping their credit card out at dinner like nothing was wrong. From the outside, you'd never know. But behind closed doors, once we sat down together and actually looked at the numbers, once we looked at the long-term picture, it was a completely different story. Maria had started getting migraines, chronic debilitating migraines that she told me she attributed directly to the stress of their financial situation. She was a nurse. She understood what stress does to the body, but even she couldn't stop it. Sharon couldn't sleep. She'd lie awake at night, tossing and turning and running the numbers over and over in her head. She was exhausted all the time, forgetful, snapping at her kids, her husband, her coworkers. She told me she didn't even recognize herself anymore. Both of them were miserable. Now, both Maria and Sharon had tried to address this problem before. I wasn't the first financial planner that they'd met with. They'd had the conversations, they'd made the spreadsheets and the budgets, and they'd promised themselves things were going to change. But they didn't. So why are they here? That's what we're going to talk about today. Now, before we talk strategy, before we get into snowball and avalanche methods and all the debt payoff talk, I need to spend some time talking about the mental and emotional side of debt. Because here's the truth, if you don't address what's happening in your head, the internal, no spreadsheet in the world, the external is going to save you. And if you put in all the work to get yourself out of debt, if you don't address the root cause, you're going to end up right back in the exact same place eventually. Now think about what Maria and Sharon were doing. They were living outwardly normal, even lavish lives, while carrying enormous amounts of debt. How does that happen? For many, it's a concept called lifestyle creep, but really it's more accurately called lifestyle denial. You make more money, so you spend more. or you want to live a certain life. So you spend as if you already do, even if the money isn't there to back it up. And bit by bit, month by month, the credit card balances creep up. And because they creep, because it's not one dramatic, catastrophic expense, it's easy to not notice or to not want to notice. Now, debt has a really unique psychological feature that most other financial problems don't have. It's both invisible and deeply shameful. You can walk around owing $160,000 and nobody knows. That invisibility makes it easy to ignore, and the shame makes it hard to confront. It becomes this secret you carry around, and it weighs on you constantly, hence the migraines and the insomnia. But you never really talk about what's causing it. Now, the turning point for both Maria and Sharon wasn't a spreadsheet, it wasn't a debt payoff plan. It was becoming truly aware that they had a problem and acknowledging the extent of it. It was finally being willing to name it, to say it out loud, to write it down. Now, Sharon knew her debt total, but when I asked her about it in our meeting, she couldn't actually say it. She just said, "It's a lot," and pushed that statement across the table to me, or all of the statements, I should say. Maria hadn't even totaled it up. Her avoidance was so strong she couldn't even take that step. All she said is, "I know it's bad. Some months we struggle to make our monthly minimum payments." Adding it up, saying it out loud to yourself is the first step. I have $55,000 in credit card debt, or I have $160,000 in credit card debt. Stop hiding it from yourself, because the secret is what gives it power over you. Becoming aware and naming your debt is part of the process of empowering yourself to resolve the problem. You can't solve a problem you do not see or refuse to admit exists. You cannot solve a problem that you believe you have no power or hope to fix. You cannot solve a problem if you put yourself as the victim in your own story. Why? Because victims are powerless. And to fix this problem, any problem, you need to be in control. You need to be in a position of power. Now, to become fully empowered, you have to complete 2 more steps. 1, admit your role in getting there. And 2, release the painful emotions. And oh boy, these 2 are difficult. Your emotional brain, the amygdala, fires up immediately when you take the steps, because your brain desperately wants to protect you from feeling pain. And these 2 steps are incredibly painful. Perhaps nothing is as emotionally triggering as looking yourself in the eye and saying, "I made a mistake. I am the reason I am in this mess. I could have done better." Human nature is to look for any possible explanation for your problems other than yourself. You'll want to say, "It's not my fault because I grew up poor. I didn't have the advantages other people have. I lost my job because of a poor economy. I had to take on this debt to escape a bad relationship. I got sick, or a loved one got sick." And on and on and on. All of those might be true, but they are also trapping you in the role of victim. No matter how bad your situation is or was, you always have some form of control. There are always things you can do to make it better. I truly, deeply believe this. Now, they might be small actions with small impacts, but they make a difference, not just because they improve your situation a small amount, but because they challenge that false belief that you are a victim, that you are powerless. And they provide evidence to your brain to support your new belief that you are in control of your own future. I'm sure some of you already have excuses running through your head. Reasons why this is never going to work for you. Telling yourself that there's nothing you can do to make things better. But if you were truly, deeply honest with yourself, there is always something you can do. I'm sure you can think of some examples of people who have done this. People who have come from deep poverty, terrible abuse, awful circumstances, who have made it out to live happy, successful lives. Now, it's incredibly hard to do this, so you won't know many of them. You'll know hundreds, maybe thousands more people who did not get out. Because it's easier, safer, more comfortable to stay in the victim role. I'll give you 2 examples of people who have beat all the odds and who have become enormously successful, who have gone through life situations likely as bad or maybe even worse than what you're facing. And they got through because they chose to be the author of their own lives, the captain of their ship, the driver of their car, whatever metaphor you like. I've talked about them before in episode 4, talking about budgeting again. If you want to get the full stories, go there. But here's a quick snapshot. The first person was Oprah Winfrey. She's an enormously famous and wealthy broadcaster and entrepreneur. She's a self-made billionaire with a B. But she wasn't handed anything. She was born a poor Black woman in the South in 1954, so you can imagine what the racial discrimination was for her. Being a woman at that time didn't help her either, and on top of that, she was desperately poor with no support. She was physically, emotionally, sexually abused, homeless at 14. But she changed her life by taking the only control that she had, exerting the only power she could to improve her situation. She dedicated herself to success in school. She found a love of radio at her school's radio station and learned everything she could about it, and that launched her career and her life. She faced many, many, many challenges along the way, but she never gave up, and now she lives the life that she always wanted. So for those who struggle with poverty, abuse, discrimination at any level, she's an example of someone who found their power, developed it, and embraced it to take control of their future. If she did, so can you. Our second example is Viktor Frankl, an Austrian psychologist who was living a good life already when the Nazis came. He and everybody he loved, his entire family, were sent to the concentration camps for over 3 years. His entire family perished. His health was so bad from years of terrible conditions that he barely survived. He lost his home, his money, his career, his family, his health during those years. He had every excuse in the book to give up, to play the victim card, but he didn't. He survived. He went on to rebuild his life, marrying again, becoming the head of a neurology department, and writing one of the most impactful books about how to find your internal power no matter your circumstances, called Man's Search for Meaning. He stands as an incredible example of resilience for those who are thrown into terrible situations where they lose everything and could easily use that as an excuse to never rebuild, never get back up, never take control of your life again. It's hard to imagine a situation worse than what he went through. And if he did it, use that as evidence that it can be done, that you too can do the same thing. It's very important to me that you understand I have deep empathy and compassion for people struggling with difficult situations and circumstances. I truly do. No one can ever fully understand what you're going through in your own life, and your situation might be so bad that every step feels like a mile. But I want you to know, I am in your corner. I believe in your ability to make your life a truly happy, successful one that you define. Your path might be longer and more difficult than others, but it's still a path that you can walk. There is still an amazing life ahead of you. It might take a lot of time and effort, but I believe you can do it. And I promise you, if you put it in the work, if you put in the time, if you put in the effort, it will be worth it. Taking responsibility for your situation is a crucial early step in the process of becoming debt-free, because you are saying no matter how this debt accumulated, no matter what difficult circumstances led to you being here, that you can take control, that you can change the course of this ship, that you can eliminate the debt, that you can live a life that you love that does not build that debt back up again, that you can build the life of your dreams. All this really means is admitting to yourself that you played a role in how it got there. Whether that's by something as simple as saying that you did not realize at the time you should have said no to something, or you should have made a different decision, or you should have set a boundary with someone, or you should have thought twice before doing something. You don't have to explain away every single purchase or every single expense. Instead, just say yes. If I had done some things differently, if I had made different choices, I would not be where I am today. When you do that, you empower yourself with the ability to change your situation, to choose differently going forward, to make it better. Without that level of control, you will never truly get out of debt. So far, we've talked about becoming aware that there's a problem, saying it out loud and totaling it up and admitting I have XYZ dollar amount in credit card debt, and then taking responsibility for how it got there as a crucial step towards empowering yourself with the ability to change it. Now, the last step, before we get into the actual mechanics of how to do this, is to release the painful emotions. This sometimes feels like an impossible ask. When I go through this process with people in person, it's hard to describe the level of emotions that people have. It's a mix of anger, shame, frustration, guilt, disgust, and more. It's a lot. There's always a lot of tears and a lot of I wish statements. I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I had known now or then what I know now. I wish I had left. I wish I had said no. I wish I had said yes. And so many more. The regret and the pain that people feel is real. And I get why people feel like that. And it's healthy to actually spend time and process those feelings. So in our sessions, I let them cry. In fact, usually I cry with them. I give them time to grieve what could have been, to feel bad for situations that they were in that they did not choose, but only for a little while. Because it's important that we look at the past openly and honestly and then let it go. Shut the door. Move forward with a clean slate. Don't trap yourself in a never-ending pity party. The past you is just that, the past. The past is over. It's done with. The present you is now. and the future you is coming. And that's what we care about, because that is what we can control. So after we've felt all of our feelings, cried it out, let out all the anger, learned our lesson from the past, then we need to say enough, because those negative emotions do not help you going forward. They trap you. They keep you in that role of victim. In fact, by giving in to those emotions and letting them dominate your thoughts and your actions and your beliefs about yourself, you are giving them even more power. But that power is yours. You control who gets it. Why would you give it away to someone or something in your past that hurts you? That doesn't help you. Reclaim that power and use it to benefit yourself. Don't let this become about shame or self-punishment. The goal here is not to feel terrible about your past decisions. The goal is to make a different decision, starting right now. Shame, guilt, anger. These emotions are not motivating, they're paralyzing. Give yourself grace. Understand that you got here because of habits, circumstances, and choices, and you control all of those things, and you can change. Now, I know it's one of those things that's easier said than done, especially when the anger or the guilt run deep. So here's one strategy that I found that helps a lot. Distance yourself from the situation. What I mean by that is to sit down with your statements and your budget and all the numbers and review the situation as if it were that of someone you deeply love. Your child, your best friend, just really anyone that you truly care about. Because we usually treat others way better than we treat ourselves. Things we say to ourselves are generally way worse than what we would ever say to someone else. So give yourself the care and respect that you would give someone else. Pretend that person you love so much and truly want the best for is sitting across the table from you. Then look at those numbers, look at that situation with empathy and compassion. But know that you also have to be deeply honest and truthful with them so that they can get their lives back on track. When you come at it that way, you tend to remove a lot of the blame and the shame, which makes it easier to move forward and actually make a change. Okay, with that foundation in place, let's talk about where to start with the numbers. I know nobody wants to talk about budgeting. It sounds boring, it sounds restrictive, it sounds like being told you can't have things. But I want to reframe that for you. A budget is not a punishment. A budget is a plan. It's you deciding in advance what you want your money to do instead of wondering where it went at the end of the month. When done correctly, a budget is a plan to help you say yes to the things that you care about and eliminate your wasteful spending on things that you don't care about. And when you're carrying credit card debt, a budget is your absolute first line of defense, because you cannot solve a debt problem if you're still adding to the debt. That's like trying to bail out a boat with a huge hole in the bottom. You have to plug that hole first. So here's what I mean by a real budget. Not a vague, we should probably spend less conversation, but an actual honest accounting of what's coming in and what's going out. The problem here is that while this idea of full budgeting is truly necessary, jumping straight to that level of detail in a budget when your brain and your heart aren't in it will just set you up to fail. And it's the reason so many people, including Maria and Sharon, have failed in the past. I have two episodes 5 and 6, that I strongly suggest you check out because they talk about how to budget for those people who have tried and failed in the past, or those people who have those creative type B right brain minds, those who just genuinely do not like anything to do with numbers or spreadsheets. I promise you that we can get you to a place where you become an expert budgeter and truly take control of your money, and you can set up a monthly routine that helps you get there. But you have to get yourself in the right headspace, the right mindset for it to actually stick. Remember, it's always about a mix of the internal and the external. To do that, you need first to get very clear on what goals you have in your life. What truly would make you happy? How do you want to spend your time? Where and how do you want to live? Feel free to dream big here, but also be honest about what you want the long term to look like. Then break down the goals for the short term, within 3 years, the intermediate term, between 3 and 7 years, and then the long term, 7+. These goals should be deeply personal and emotionally triggering. No one in the world should have the same goals as you because they're that personalized. Spend some real time here and define what a happy, successful life looks like for you. These goals are fundamentally important because they are not only driving our spending decisions, they also program our brain to focus our attention on anything around us that can help us make our goals come true. Then, once you are crystal clear on your goals, and honestly, I've seen people take just months and months to do this part alone, then every single spending decision should be held against those goals. Every time you make a purchase or pay a bill, you should ask yourself, Does this align with my short, intermediate, or long-term goals? If not, don't do it. This is called mindful spending, and it's a budgeting strategy that truly works because your spending will naturally shift towards the items that make your life goals come true. Generally, what happens is that after you practice mindful spending for a few months, you get a bit more curious about what's going on in your spending, and you want to see more detailed information. You want a bit more budgeting structure. So at that point, we move towards the next level of budgeting, broad-based budgeting, where you compare your general spending habits against just 3 categories: needs, wants, future you. I usually use the 50-30-20 method, but these are guidelines that can change based on your spending habits and your cost of living wherever you live. The 50-30-20 breaks down into 50% of your take-home income should be spent on needs, 30% on wants, and 20% on future you. Needs are those things you need to survive: rent, food, utilities, etc., things like that. Wants are the things that make your life fun: entertainment, dining out, gifts. Future you is money for your future, extra payments on your debt, emergency fund savings, saving towards your other goals, and then of course retirement, whatever other goals you might have. Now to do this, you gather your bank statements and credit card statements and receipts if you use cash, and then quickly go through each transaction for a month. Write it down, the total, on a spreadsheet that has 3 columns, one for needs, one for wants, and one labeled future you. Then as you go through, just put the dollar amount of each expense into one of those categories. No labels, no subcategories, just the money amount. Don't get caught up in little details here. Just do your best and get a general breakdown. Then compare those totals to your income of 50-30-20 and see how you are doing. Are you near 50% in needs, or 30% in wants, and 20% future you? This is broad-based budgeting. If you are significantly off in any one area, usually wants are quite a bit higher than people think, then going forward, you can pay special attention to that type of spending and attempt to cut back. This type of budgeting gives you a bit more direction and information, but tends not to be overwhelming, especially for those people who just don't like doing this stuff. Now, I bet you know what I'm gonna say next. After a little while, those people who successfully master broad-based budgeting for a few months, they start to wonder a little bit, I wonder which categories in my wants area or my needs area are the biggest problem for me. They want even more information, and that leads us to our final level of budgeting, full budgeting. Now, full budgeting is tracking every dollar using 20 to 40 subcategories to break down your spending on a granular level. Then rather than looking at the 50-30-20 breakdown, you make 2 personalized target budgets. Yes, 2. The first is an annualized target budget. This is where you look at your long-term spending habits over the year and come up with what you spend in each category. Estimate it. Then you divide it by 12 and put that down as a monthly number, because we want a monthly target budget of your annualized spending. This is important because we have a lot of expenses that don't hit us every single month, like high fuel bills in the winter or travel bills in the summer, gift spending during the holidays, or certain sports expenses for the kids. We need to put money aside every month to pay for those expenses. So this annual budget tells us how much to save. What's really interesting about an annualized budget is that in my experience, I'd say almost 2/3 of the people who do this are surprised when they look at the total annualized spending number and find out it's higher than what they bring home annually. Which makes sense. That's why we have credit card debt. But you'd be shocked how surprised people really are about it. Now, the second target budget is key, and almost every budgeting tool out there ignores it. You're going to make a short-term target budget where you compare your current spending from last month to your annualized target budget and see which areas are off. Pick 1 category from the needs section and 2 from the wants, and make a spending target for those 3 categories. Then you're going to spend your time cutting back spending in those areas over the next month. You aren't going to make drastic changes across the board in all your categories because that will not work. You're going to want to, but that's a bad idea. Focus on 3 per month. This is what actually leads your budget to making a lasting, meaningful change in your life. By cutting spending in those areas, you can redirect that money towards paying down your debt. That's the whole point. Then once the debt is gone, that extra money, whether it's $5 a month or $5,000 a month, you use towards your other goals that you listed above. And this is how you budget your way to financial freedom. Now, this is critical. We have one more big thing to do before we jump into the details of debt repayment strategies. We need to understand why the debt got there in the first place. Because the reason for Maria's debt buildup is very different than Sharon's, and because of that, the solutions are different too. Looking at your debt situation, ask yourself, is this a one-off problem, or is this a systemic problem? These sound like the same thing, but they're not. Let me explain by going back to our two families. We have Sharon's family, $150,000 of income, $55,000 in debt. On paper, their income should be enough. They're not living wildly above their means on a monthly basis. So what happened? Well, when I dug into Sharon's finances, the story became pretty clear. The debt had largely built up around specific events, vacations, big family experiences, the skiing trips, the surfing trips, the long weekend getaways. They'd put the trips on their credit card with plans to pay them off, but then life would get in the way and the balance would sit and grow. Then they'd go away again, and on it went. Their core monthly spending was actually pretty reasonable. It was these big, exciting, emotionally meaningful experiences that were driving the debt. That's what I call a one-off problem. Specific spending categories that you can identify, address, and change without gutting your entire lifestyle. And here's the beautiful thing about Sharon's situation. You don't have to stop doing all the things you love. You just have to do two things. First, when the urge to escape for a long weekend comes up, dig deeper into why you feel that way. When I questioned Sharon about this, asking her to think back on her last 3 vacations, she discovered a pretty clear pattern. When her family was very busy with work and school and sports for the kids, she would start to feel disconnected. She wanted to feel close to her family again, and she loved how they bonded when they were on vacation. In fact, Sharon was the one who always suggested the getaways. She had never really thought about it before like that. We discussed how next time she got this feeling, what other ways could she bring her family together again that wouldn't bust her budget? She and her husband had a long talk after our meeting, and the next time that I saw them, they told me that they had come up with a whole bunch of ideas to come together that were either free or substantially cheaper, and they put them into a jar. And the next time they felt the need to come together in that way, they would draw from that jar. They put things in there like camping out in their own backyard, or having a board game night, or hitting up the local beaches for an entire day rather than a quick trip. And maybe they would hit the local biking trails, whatever it is. They also decided to institute mandatory family dinner night every Sunday, when they knew at that time they usually didn't have games or other events going on. They hoped this kind of connection would help her avoid that urge to escape and spend money that they didn't have. The second thing they did was get out a big calendar and plan out their actual vacations for the year. Not only did it give them something to look forward to, but they also planned it so far in advance that they had the time to save for it in advance. They made a game out of how much they could save before the trip, because that would determine, what activities they did or whether they packed sandwiches or ate out at different restaurants during the trip. Even the kids got really actively involved. They would encourage the parents, hey, let's not dine out tonight. Let's stay in and scavenge the pantry instead, so they could put that $50 or $100 instead towards the vacation. Not only did this give them the family fun time away still, but it bonded them in the process of saving and anticipating the trip. Years have gone by since I last saw Sharon's family, but the last time that I heard about them, they had started budgeting right away, followed a strict debt repayment plan, and ultimately became debt-free in about 4 years. And during that time, they still love their life of adventure, vacation, and family time. Now, Maria's situation is fundamentally different. Maria's family earns nearly double Sharon's, and they have nearly 3 times the debt. And when I went through their numbers, the picture that emerged was not a few big charges. It was a total lifestyle that cost more every single month than what they were actually bringing in. The fancy cars have big payments. The lake house has carrying costs. The ski condo has dues and maintenance. The kids' club sports have fees and travel and gear. The dining out happens constantly. The boat needs insurance and fuel and storage and repairs. You get the point. Every single one of these things is a choice. And in isolation, each one might seem justified, but together they add up to a monthly cash burn that exceeded their income. The credit card is quietly filling the gap every single month, and with a $160,000 balance, it's been doing that for a long time. That is a systemic problem, and it requires a harder conversation because the math doesn't work. And the only way to fix it is to change the underlying math. That means making some real choices about their lifestyle, not just tweaking one category here or there. When I questioned Maria and her husband about their monthly expenses, asking them to total them up, they were convinced that they were bringing in enough to cover all of them. They jotted down all the big bills, their household expenses, and then the bills related to each one of their luxury items, the lake house, the boat, the ski condo, etc. Done their way, with their math off the top of their heads, they look like they just barely met their expenses. They honestly were unsure of how they got into this situation, how the credit card bills got so high and why they keep going up. Now, they wanted to write it off to one-time expenses that happened a long time ago, like they had to fix up the lake house when they bought it, or the boat had a major repair done, or they had to replace a car, things like that. But it really didn't look like that to me. So I asked them to go back and gather 6 months of statements. and to come back to me with them. They did. We spent several hours going through them. I bet you know what we found. Across the board, for their household expenses and the expenses connected to each of their luxury items, they had underestimated the carrying costs by about 30%. When we went through them, they kept saying, oh, yeah, that's right. Forgot about that bill. Or, oh, yeah, I remember that now. Now, they paid these bills when they came along. They knew what they were, but they were in deep denial about how much money every luxury item truly cost them. And they never wanted to budget because they were deep in avoidance. They loved their life and all of their luxuries, and they did not want to even consider that maybe they couldn't afford to keep them. But the reality hit them in the face. We ran some projections, and if they kept spending the way that they were, the debt was going to grow so much that the minimum payments were going to force them to liquidate things just to avoid bankruptcy. The future was pretty bleak. Now, this is where that psychology that we talked about earlier matters so much. Because telling someone to give up their lake house or downsize their car or pull their kid out of competitive sports, that is an emotionally devastating conversation. These things aren't just possessions. They're tied to their identity, to their status, to what it means to them to be a good parent, to who you believe yourself to be. So we had some really hard conversations. They needed to forget about everything they currently have, pretend it wasn't there, and just start saying if they were to build their life right now, what truly matters to them? What would it look like? What brings them joy? Was it time at the lake house? Or was it time at your primary home if you were able to live comfortably without the stress of financial troubles? Was it knowing that you were going to be able to retire comfortably? Or was it time skiing at the condo? No one could answer this but them. They needed to define what brought them joy, what their priorities were, what things could they let go of. They understood that at the end of the day, they needed to compromise because the current lifestyle that they were living was heading for a cliff. And if they were worried about what other people would think if they sold the lake house now or got rid of the boat, then they need to consider how they're going to feel if they end up being forced to do it or declaring bankruptcy. It was an emotional and difficult meeting. Maria's husband was mad, angry with Maria himself, angry with me. He did not want to think about any of this. They left that meeting feeling terrible. But a few months later, they reached out. They had taken my advice, really thought about their priorities and their goals. They made some hard decisions, and they had a plan. They were going to sell the boat and the ski condo and begin to rent out the lake house when they weren't using it. They didn't want to reduce the kids' sports spending at all because that was really important to them. They also wanted to keep their big group vacations with their neighbors. They built a comprehensive budget, a plan that focused on maintaining those wishes and on paying down their debt, and they both got on board immediately. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen people so committed to budgeting so fast. It took a while to get all the changes implemented, but in about 5 years, they were able to come back in and say that they were debt-free. Just as important, or more important, they were happy. They feel confident in their financial plan now. They care a lot less about what others think of them, and they maintained that laser focus on what truly matters to them. Now, I hope the key thing that you notice here, or one of the key things that you're going to notice here, is that neither of these families earned more money to solve their problem. So many people in debt focus on working more, getting a second job or a side hustle to bring in more money, and they think that's the only way to solve their problem. That's almost always not the issue. The issue is combining that internal work, becoming aware that your debt and your spending habits are an issue you need to address, admitting the reality of the problem by totaling that debt and taking responsibility for your role in getting it there, and then learning from your past, understanding why you made those decisions, whether it's a one-off type spending situation or a more systemic monthly lifestyle spending problem. Closing the door on those negative emotions and then adding the external work of coming up with a plan to budget your way to financial freedom using a debt repayment strategy, which we're going to get to. That is the way forward. That is the path that leads to success. Sure, earning more can help, obviously, but if you don't address the root causes and combine that internal and the external work, you're going to end up in the exact same place again, sometime in the future. I've seen it a lot. All right, so now you've done your budget. You've found your gap, you understand whether you're dealing with a one-off or a systemic problem, and you've started to make some changes. Now let's talk about what actually paying this thing off looks like. There are two main strategies that personal finance experts talk about constantly, and honestly, they're both legitimate. Don't believe the BS that one is better than the other. I've seen both work thousands of times. They're called the debt snowball and the debt avalanche methods. Depending on how your brain works, one might work better than the other. But let me walk you through both. The debt snowball. The snowball method was popularized by Dave Ramsey, and it goes like this. You list all of your debts, from the smallest balance to the largest balance, completely ignoring the interest rate. You make the minimum payment on every debt except the smallest balance. On the smallest balance, you make the minimum plus every extra dollar you have. When that balance hits zero, you take everything you were paying on it, the minimum payment plus the extra that you found from your budgeting process, and you roll it into the next smallest debt. The payments compound, they snowball, and you work your way up the list. Or down the list, I should say. The math here is not optimal. You're not necessarily paying off the most expensive debt first, which means you could end up paying more interest over time. But here's why this method works. It's designed around how humans actually behave, not how spreadsheets behave. Paying off a debt completely, even a small one, feels incredible. It creates momentum. It creates proof in your brain that you can do this. It builds your confidence. It changes your relationship with the process from something daunting and overwhelming and abstract to something real and winnable. If you've tried to pay off debt before and quit, the snowball method is probably your better bet. The psychological wins are fuel that you may need. Now, the second option is the debt avalanche. Equally valid. The avalanche method is mathematically superior. Here you list your debts from the highest interest rate to the lowest interest rate and you ignore the balance. You make minimum payments on everything still, but you attack the highest rate debt with every extra dollar you have. The logic, the highest interest rate is costing you the most money, so get rid of it first. Pay less total interest over their repayment time. Get out of debt faster if the numbers work out. This is the better strategy if you are highly motivated by numbers, if you can stay disciplined without those quick wins, and if your highest interest debt also happens to be somewhat manageable in balance size. If you have a $40,000 card at 24% interest, the avalanche method could save you thousands of dollars, but you're going to be staring at that balance for a long time before it moves meaningfully. The risk of the avalanche method, you grind away for months, the balance barely moves, and it starts to feel hopeless. That's when people give up and go back to their old habits. So which one should you use? My honest answer, use whichever one you will stick with. If you're more emotionally driven and you need to feel progress, use the snowball method. If you're analytical and the interest savings will keep you motivated, go with avalanche. You can also hybrid. If your smallest debt and your highest rate debt are close in balance, start with the highest rate one and get that win early. The best debt repayment strategy is the one you will follow through on. Now, here's a tactic that doesn't get talked about enough, and it's one of my favorites because it's simple, automatic, and it compounds over time. It's called rolling over your minimum payment, and I know it's part of the bigger lesson we just talked about, but stay with me. Here's how it works. Let's say you have 3 credit cards. Card A, $5,000 balance, minimum payment, $100 a month. Card B, $15,000 with a minimum of $250. Card C, $35,000 with a minimum of $600. If you're using the snowball method, you're attacking card A first. You're paying the $100 minimum plus an extra $300 per month you found from your budgeting strategy. So $400 total on card A. After several months, card A goes to zero. Here's where most people make a mistake. They breathe a sigh of relief and that $400 just sort of disappears back into their spending. Don't do that. Instead, you take the entire $400 immediately and roll it into card B. Now you're paying $250 plus the $400, that's $650 a month attacking card B, while still making your minimums on card C. When card B is gone, you roll the entire $650 onto card C, plus its $600 minimum. Now you're putting $1,250 a month at card C. Now, here's what happens as you go through this process. As you're paying down the debt, your required minimum payment on your statements goes down. So some people only add the extra money that they have from their budgeting and the new lower required minimum payment. Don't do that. Keep the original minimum payment because that's just more money towards eliminating the debt. This is a little extra perk for the snowball method. The snowball isn't just about which debt you pay off first, it's about keeping that momentum in the system and not letting that freed up cash from those evaporating minimum payments go away. So every time a debt dies, the payment goes to work somewhere else. When that minimum required payment goes away from you eliminating that debt, you have this extra money you can attack another debt. That doesn't happen with the avalanche method if the biggest interest rate also happens to have the biggest balance. You'll be nursing along those other debts with their required minimums a lot longer. This is also why finding any extra money, a tax refund, a bonus, cutting a subscription, whatever you can find matters so much early in the process. Even an extra $50 or $100 a month at the beginning creates a compounding effect that pays dividends for years. Okay, I'm not gonna lie to you and try and sell you some get out of debt quick BS. This is gonna take time and effort, especially if you have a lot of debt and or lower income. For Sharon and Maria, it was about 4 to 5 years to get out of debt. For others, I could see that lasting longer depending on how aggressively they restructure their lifestyle and how they set up an effective budget. That's a long time to stay disciplined and motivated. So let's talk about what that actually looks like. Build a real budget that works. One that doesn't just focus on what you spent, but instead gives a plan for what you should spend. Own your numbers and take control of your life. Celebrate your milestones. Paid off a card? That's a real genuine win. Do something that acknowledges it. Not something that puts you back in the debt, obviously, but a nice dinner that's affordable, a day trip, something that marks the moment. These milestones matter psychologically. You are rewiring your relationship with money in real time. Don't forget to build a small emergency fund alongside repayment. I know that sounds counterintuitive. Why save money when I have debt? But if you don't have any cushion and an unexpected expense hits you, you're going to put it right back on that credit card. Even $1,000 to $2,000 set aside creates a buffer that protects your progress. Have the hard conversations in your household. If you're in a partnership, both people need to be in on the plan. Financial secrecy, even well-meaning secrecy, creates resentment. Get aligned. Check in monthly. Make it a normal, non-charged conversation, not a crisis moment. And, really importantly, understand that setbacks will happen. You will have a month where you overspend, a car will need a repair, someone will get sick. Something's going to come up. It's not failure, it's life. The question is whether you course correct or whether you use it as an excuse to abandon your whole plan. Most people who fail at debt repayment don't fail because of one bad month. They fail because they decided that one bad month meant the whole effort was useless. It's not. Keep going. I truly want to be a partner with you on your financial journey. To that end, click the link below in the description for a free debt repayment plan spreadsheet to help get yourself organized and on track. Okay, I want to bring it back to Maria and Sharon for a second. Maria's family had a hard road ahead of them. The structural changes that they needed to make were real and significant and emotionally difficult. They had to have conversations about what their lifestyle actually cost versus what it was worth to them. They ended up making some decisions that surprised even themselves, letting go of the ski condo and the boat, refinancing some things, renting out the lake house when they weren't using it. None of that is easy, but they started sleeping well again. The migraine started to get better. Eventually, their lives improved with less commitments on their time and their money. Sharon's family actually had a relatively smooth path once we identified her root cause. We set up that dedicated adventure fund, automatic contributions flowing every month specifically for their trips in their budget. They still go skiing. They still take the big family vacation. They just save for it first instead of charging it and figuring it out later. And as I said earlier, within about 4 years, they were debt-free. And they went on a really beautiful hiking trip to celebrate. The point is, this is solvable. Whatever your number is, 20,000, 55,000, 160,000, it is solvable. But it requires honesty. It requires facing the number directly. It requires understanding why it happened, not just that it happened. And it requires a plan that accounts for who you actually are as a human being, not just who you are on a spreadsheet. All right, let me leave you with the short version of everything that we covered today, because I want you to be able to take action as soon as possible. Step 1, become aware that you have a problem. Say it out loud. Write down every debt, every balance, every interest rate. Don't look away from it. Total it up and say, I have this much in debt. Step 2, admit your role in building up the debt to where it is today, so that you can empower yourself as the person who will be able to change the direction of your financial life going forward. Feel all the feelings, learn all the life lessons you need to from the past, but then close the door. Don't get caught up in negative emotions. Let them go and move forward. Step 3, identify your goals, your real, deeply personal life goals. Begin a process of mindful spending, then broad-based budgeting. And finally, step 4, build a budget based on actual spending with 2 target budgets. Begin a monthly process of finding areas that you can cut back and redirect your spending. Step 5, identify whether your debt problem is a one-off issue or a systemic lifestyle issue. The answer changes the solution. Step 6, pick a repayment strategy, snowball or avalanche, whichever one you're actually going to stick with. Step 7, roll your minimum payments forward every time you eliminate a debt and keep them at the same level even if they go down. Keep that momentum going. Step 8, protect your mindset. Celebrate your wins. Expect setbacks. Keep going anyway. And 9, don't do this alone. Whether it's a financial planner, an accountability partner, a spouse, a friend, find someone who can be in it with you. You've got this. I truly mean that. Thanks so much for listening today. And if this episode hit close to home, please share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And I will see you next week. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep building the life you actually want.